She thought retirement meant rest, but anxiety never went away. The clock on the wall read 2:47 p.m. when Hillary adjusted the strap of her purse on her lap for the third time in 5 minutes. The waiting room at Dr. Martinez's office had that characteristic smell of air conditioning mixed with lavender, a scent that should have been calming, but only intensified her awareness of being there. Her fingers, adorned only by the wedding ring she insisted on wearing even 8 years after being widowed, drummed silently on the brown leather of her purse. Hillary observed her own hands, age spots beginning to appear, veins more prominent but still steady. Hands that had worked for 42 years as a nurse at Cedar Falls General Hospital, Iowa. Hands that had cared, consoled, saved. Now, these same hands trembled slightly as she waited for her 4th therapy session. The Better Homes and Gardens magazine on her lap remained closed. Hillary couldn't concentrate on garden decoration or fall recipes when her mind insisted on redoing the same calculations that kept her awake at 3 a.m. Retirement plus Social Security plus Robert's small inheritance, minus taxes, minus health insurance, minus inflation. Hillary Thompson? Dr. Martinez's gentle voice interrupted the familiar mental cycle. Hillary looked up to meet the therapist's warm smile, a woman of about 50, brown hair pulled back in a low bun, delicate glasses framing kind eyes. There was something about Dr. Martinez's presence that didn't judge, that simply was there. "How are you today?" the therapist asked as she settled into the chair across from Hillary. Hillary hesitated. How was she? Externally, she was fine. She had eaten her breakfast, 2 slices of whole wheat toast with strawberry jam, as always. She had checked her bank statements online, also as always. She had watered the balcony plants and folded the clean clothes. A perfectly normal morning for a 74-year-old retiree. Internally, however, "I did the calculations again last night," Hillary said, her voice carrying the weight of a confession. 3 times. Dr. Martinez nodded, unsurprised. "And what did the calculations tell you this time?" "The same thing they always tell me." Hillary sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "That I should be fine, that I prepared adequately, that Robert and I were responsible." She paused. "But then why can't I sleep?" It was a question that echoed through the silent walls of her house every night. Hillary had done everything right. She had religiously contributed to her 401k, had paid off the house mortgage, had saved for emergencies. She and Robert had meticulously planned for retirement, dreaming of trips they never took and hobbies they never explored. But Robert died at 69, 3 years after retiring, and Hillary discovered that all the financial planning in the world couldn't fill the void of a silent house or calm the persistent fear that the money would simply run out. "Tell me about last night," Dr. Martinez said, her voice a gentle invitation. Hillary closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to return to that early morning. "I was watching the news. There was a report about inflation, about how medication prices are rising." She opened her eyes, and suddenly I was in the kitchen, with all the bills spread on the table, calculating how long my money would last if I needed specialized care. The therapist remained silent, allowing Hillary's words to fill the space between them. "I know it's irrational," Hillary continued. "I know I have sufficient resources. But what if I live to 95? What if I need an expensive nursing home? What if there's an economic crisis?" Her voice grew quieter. "What if I become a burden?" The last question came out as a whisper, carrying the weight of a fear Hillary could barely admit to herself. The house on Maple Street was a testament to a life well lived. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, front yard carefully maintained with hydrangeas that she and Robert planted in 1987. It was a house that breathed stability, mortgage paid off, new roof in 2019, updated heating system. But in the early morning hours, when the silence was broken only by the tick-tock of the kitchen clock, the house seemed to echo with worries Hillary couldn't silence. It was 3:23 a.m. when she found herself in the kitchen again, laptop open on the oak table Robert had built with his own hands. The blue light from the screen illuminated her face as she navigated through online bank statements, a nightly ritual that had become as automatic as brushing her teeth. Checking account, 12,147. 32. Savings, 8,956.78. 401k, 387 cents to 24.15. Social Security, 1,147 monthly. The numbers danced on the screen, familiar as a memorized prayer. Hillary knew every cent, every market fluctuation, every automatic deduction. There was a strange security in knowing the numbers so intimately, but also a growing terror. She opened a new spreadsheet, the 13th version of her financial longevity calculations. If I live to 85, if inflation is 3% per year, if I need home care at 80, each scenario she created seemed to reveal a new vulnerability, a new way for the money to not be enough. Hillary remembered when she was young, working double shifts at the hospital, worried about paying rent and buying groceries. Back then, retirement seemed like a distant promised land, a place where financial worries would finally cease. She imagined that at 74, she would be sitting on a porch, knitting and watching grandchildren play in the yard. Instead, she was alone at 3 a.m., calculating whether she could afford to live. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Hillary looked at the caller ID. Sarah, daughter. Her heart tightened. Sarah only called this late when something was wrong. Mom, sorry to call so late. I saw the light in your kitchen and... Hillary looked out the window and saw Sarah's house across the street, a light on in the baby's room. Her youngest daughter, 45, had moved nearby after Emma's birth, her first child. Everything's fine, dear. I just couldn't sleep. Mom, Sarah's voice carried familiar concern. You're doing the calculations again, aren't you? Hillary hesitated. How did her daughter know her so well? Maybe. Can I come over? Emma finally fell asleep and Tom is snoring. 15 minutes later, Sarah was sitting in Hillary's kitchen, 2 cups of chamomile tea steaming between them. Sarah had the same blue eyes as Hillary, but her face bore the marks of a new mother, deep circles under her eyes, and an exhaustion Hillary recognized from her own motherhood days. Mom, you need to stop torturing yourself with these numbers, Sarah said, gently closing the laptop. You have more money saved than most people see in their entire lives. But what if it's not enough? The question came from Hillary like a tired sigh. What if I live too long? What if I get sick? What if I become a burden to you and Michael? Sarah reached out and covered Hillary's hand. Mom, you would never be a burden. Never. You say that now, Hillary murmured. But you have a small daughter, a career, a life. You shouldn't have to worry about me, too. Worrying about each other is what families do. Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. Remember when I was little and afraid of the dark? You always said that fears grow in silence. Hillary smiled weakly. She remembered. She used to sit on Sarah's bed, chasing away nighttime fears with stories and lullabies. Maybe it's time for you to talk about these fears out loud, Sarah suggested, with someone who can help you process them. That's how Hillary found Dr. Martinez. The 4th session with Dr. Martinez began differently. Instead of sitting immediately, Hillary stood at the office window, watching the street movement below. It was an October afternoon in Cedar Falls, and the tree leaves were beginning to change color: gold, red, orange. A color palette that had always calmed her. It's beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Martinez commented, joining her at the window. Robert always said autumn was the most honest season, Hillary said. No pretenses, just accepting change. He sounds like he was a wise man. Hillary smiled, a genuine expression that lit up her face. He was. 46 years of marriage, and he could still surprise me. She paused. He didn't worry about money like I do. He said we'd worry about problems when they came, not before. And how did you feel about his attitude? Frustrated sometimes. Hillary laughed softly. I was the one who paid the bills, who planned, who worried. Robert lived in the present. She moved away from the window and sat down. Maybe he was right. Dr. Martinez settled into her chair. Tell me more about what it was like when you were planning for retirement. Hillary closed her eyes, allowing herself to return to those days. We had an entire folder of plans. Places we wanted to visit, things we wanted to do. Robert wanted to learn to play guitar. I wanted to take a painting class. Her voice grew softer. We thought we'd have decades together. And now you're living a retirement you didn't plan. Exactly. Hillary opened her eyes. All our plans were for two. The budget, the activities, the dreams. I didn't know how to be retired alone. The therapist nodded. And how does this relate to your financial worries? Hillary hesitated, searching for the right words. When Robert was alive, I worried about having enough money for both of us. Now I worry about having enough money to not be a problem for anyone. A problem? To not need to ask for help. To not depend on Sarah or Michael. To not... Hillary stopped, fighting against tears that threatened to appear. To not end up alone and without resources in some terrible place. Dr. Martinez remained silent for a moment, allowing Hillary's words to echo in the office. Hillary, can you tell me about your childhood? How did your family deal with money? The question caught Hillary by surprise. My childhood? What does that have to do with... Sometimes our adult fears have roots in past experiences. You don't need to answer if you don't feel comfortable. Hillary considered the question. She rarely talked about her childhood, not because it was traumatic, but because it seemed irrelevant to her current life. My parents were farmers, she began slowly. Hard-working, honest, but always worried about the next season, the next harvest. I grew up hearing conversations about money. There was never enough. There was always an emergency. She paused. My mother used to say that financial security was the only thing that mattered, that without money, you had nothing. And did you believe that? I lived it. Hillary sighed. When I was 12, my father got sick. He couldn't work the farm. We lost almost everything. We had to move to town, live in a small apartment. My mother worked 3 jobs to support us. Dr. Martinez nodded. That must have been scary for a child. It was. And that's when I decided I would never be vulnerable like that I would always have enough money saved. Hillary looked at her own hands. I guess I never stopped being that 12-year-old girl, afraid of losing everything. And now, at 74, you're still trying to protect that little girl. The therapist's words hit Hillary like a gentle revelation. She had never thought of it that way, but it made sense. Her entire adult life had been an attempt to create the security she lost in childhood. But I succeeded, Hillary said, almost to herself. I became a nurse, married a good man, raised 2 wonderful children, retired with dignity. I should feel secure. Should, Dr. Martinez agreed. But feelings don't always follow logic, do they? That night, Hillary found herself in the kitchen again, but this time without the laptop. Instead, she held a cup of tea and looked out the window at the garden she and Robert had cultivated together. The full moon illuminated the rose bushes that were still blooming, defying winter's approach. Dr. Martinez's words echoed in her mind. Feelings don't always follow logic. Hillary thought of all the times she had comforted patients at the hospital, offering words of comfort she herself now struggled to accept. How many times had she told someone that worrying didn't change the outcome? How many times had she encouraged others to live one day at a time? The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Michael, her older son, calling from Seattle. Hi, Mom. How are you? Michael's voice always calmed her. At 48, he had inherited Robert's calm nature, but also Hillary's determination. He was a software engineer, married to a lovely teacher named Lisa, father of 2 teenagers. I'm fine, dear. How are the kids? Jake is preparing for final exams, and Mia is obsessed with the school soccer team. Michael laughed. Lisa sends her love. She said you should come visit us soon. Hillary smiled. I would love that, Mom. Michael's voice became more serious. Sarah told me you're doing therapy. I'm proud of you for seeking help. I don't know if it's helping much, Hillary admitted. I still worry about the same things. What kind of things? Hillary hesitated. Michael had always been the son who worried less, who assumed everything would work out. How could she explain her fears without sounding paranoid? Money things, she said finally. Worries about the future. Mom, You know Lisa and I are doing well financially, right? And Sarah too. If you need anything. It's not about needing help now, Hillary interrupted. It's about, what if I need help later? What if I become a burden? Michael was silent for a moment. Mom, do you remember when I was little and broke my arm? Hillary smiled. Of course. You were trying to impress a girl, climbing that ridiculously tall tree. And you and Dad spent 3 days at the hospital with me. You took turns so I would never be alone. You missed work, spent money you didn't have, worried until you got sick. You were our son. It was our job to take care of you. Exactly. Michael's voice was gentle but firm. And now you're our mother. It's our privilege to take care of you, if and when you need it. It's not a burden. It's love. After they hung up, Hillary remained in the kitchen, Michael's words echoing in her mind. It's not a burden. It's love. She thought of all the times she had cared for her aging parents, never considering it a burden. She thought of how honored she had felt to be able to repay the love they had given her. Why was it so hard to accept that her children might feel the same? Hillary walked to the living room and sat in Robert's favorite chair. It was a brown leather armchair, worn from use, but incredibly comfortable. Robert used to sit there every night, reading the newspaper or watching the news. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the last conversation they had about money. It was a few months before he died, when they were reviewing their wills. Hillary, he had said, you need to promise me something. When I'm no longer here, don't let fear take over your life. What kind of fear? She had asked. Fear of not having enough, fear of being a burden, fear of living. Robert had taken her hand. We worked our whole lives to have security and retirement. Don't let worry steal the peace we deserve. Hillary opened her eyes, tears running down her face. She had broken the promise she made to Robert. She had let fear take over. But maybe it wasn't too late to change that. The 5th session with Dr. Martinez began with Hillary telling about her conversations with Sarah and Michael. The therapist listened attentively, making occasional notes, but mainly offering her complete presence. How did you feel after talking to your children? Dr. Martinez asked. Confused, Hillary admitted. Part of me felt relieved. They really seem to want to take care of me if I need it. But another part of me still resists the idea. What part is that resists? Hillary thought for a moment. The part that learned that depending on others is dangerous. The part that saw my mother struggle alone when my father got sick. What if I told you there's a difference between dependence and interdependence? How so? Dr. Martinez leaned slightly forward. Dependence is when you have no choice, when you're completely at the mercy of others. Interdependence is when you choose to accept help as part of a loving and reciprocal relationship. Hillary considered this. But I can't reciprocate in the same way. I'm older, have less energy. Who said reciprocation has to be equal? The therapist smiled. You spent 42 years caring for people as a nurse. You raised 2 wonderful children. You were a loving wife. You've already given so much to the world. But that was in the past. Was it? Don't you continue to be a source of love and wisdom for your family? Don't you offer your presence, your experience, your care? Hillary had never thought of it that way. She always measured her contribution in terms of physical work or financial resources. The idea that her simple presence could have value was new. Can I ask you a question? Dr. Martinez said. If Sarah or Michael were in your situation, worried, anxious about the future, what would you tell them? I would say, Hillary stopped, realizing where the question was leading. I would say they don't need to carry the weight of the world alone, that it's normal to ask for help, that they deserve peace and happiness. And why do you deserve less than you would offer your children? The question hung in the air between them. Hillary didn't have a ready answer, just a growing sense that maybe she was being harder on herself than she would be with anyone else. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe because I've always been the caregiver. It's hard to accept that now I might need care. What if taking care of you was a gift you give your children, the chance to repay the love you gave them? Hillary felt something move inside her, a small shift, like a door opening slightly. Maybe her fears weren't about money after all. Maybe they were about control, about purpose, about her place in the world. "Dr. Martinez," Hillary said slowly, "how do I stop worrying about things that may never happen?" The therapist smiled. "That's a very important question, and the answer isn't simple, but I can give you a place to start." "Where?" "In the present. In this moment now. Are you safe? Do you have what you need today?" Hillary looked around the office, the green plants, the soft light coming through the window, the therapist's calm presence. "Yes," she said, "today I'm fine." "Then start there. When your mind begins to wander to future scenarios, bring it back to today, to this moment, to this breath." It sounds too simple. The best solutions usually are simple. Not easy, but simple. Hillary nodded, feeling a small seed of hope planting itself in her chest. Maybe she could learn to live in the present. Maybe she could find peace even with uncertainties. That afternoon, Hillary decided to do something she hadn't done in months: work in the garden. She put on her old gardening clothes, faded jeans and a t-shirt Robert used to wear, and went out to the backyard. The garden was in transition. Summer flowers were wilting, but fall plants were blooming. Hillary knelt beside the chrysanthemum bed she and Robert had planted years ago. The flowers were robust, resistant, capable of surviving the first frosts. While removing weeds, Hillary allowed herself to be completely present. She felt the cold earth between her fingers, heard the sound of dry leaves being moved by the wind, smelled the earthy aroma of autumn. For the first time in months, her mind wasn't calculating or worrying. It was simply there. "Mom?" Sarah's voice made her look up. Her daughter was standing at the fence that separated their properties, Emma sleeping in her arms. "Hi, dear. How's the little one?" "Finally fell asleep after a busy morning," Sarah smiled. "Can I join you? Emma loves being outdoors." "Of course." Sarah crossed the yard and sat on the grass next to Hillary, adjusting Emma in her arms. The 6-month-old baby had the family's blue eyes and a heart-melting smile. "It's good to see you in the garden again," Sarah said. "You and Dad used to spend hours here." "I had forgotten how relaxing it is," Hillary admitted, continuing to remove weeds. "Your therapist told me to focus on the present. I think the garden is a good place to practice that." Sarah nodded. "How is therapy going?" "Better than I expected." Hillary sat back on her heels. "I'm beginning to understand that my fears might not really be about money. What are they about then?" Hillary considered the question. "About control, I think. About feeling like I have a purpose. About not being a burden." She looked at Emma, who was waking up and watching the leaves dancing in the wind. "About accepting that aging means changing, not disappearing." "You could never disappear for us," Sarah said softly. "You're the center of our family. You always have been." Hillary felt tears sting her eyes. "Sometimes it's hard to believe that when you're alone in the kitchen at 3 a.m. "Then maybe you shouldn't be alone at 3 a.m, Sarah smiled. "How about calling me next time? I'll probably be awake anyway, feeding Emma." The idea of not facing her nighttime worries alone was strangely comforting. "You wouldn't mind? Mom, you called me in the middle of the night countless times when I was a child. When I had nightmares, when I was sick, when I was scared. It's my turn to give back." Emma started to fuss, and Sarah lifted her, rocking her gently. "Want to hold her while I get a blanket from the car?" Hillary extended her arms, and Sarah carefully placed Emma in her lap. The baby calmed immediately, her blue eyes focusing on Hillary's face. "Hello, little one," Hillary murmured. "You're so perfect." Emma smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. Hillary felt her heart expand, filled with a love so pure it momentarily pushed away all her worries. "You know," Hillary said when Sarah returned with the blanket, "I was so focused on worrying about the future that I almost missed the present. Almost missed these moments with Emma, with you, with Michael." "But you didn't miss them," Sarah said, sitting beside her mother. "You're still here. We're still here. And we have a lot of time ahead." Hillary looked at her daughter, then at the granddaughter in her arms, then at the garden around them. For the first time in months, the future didn't seem scary. It seemed possible. 2 weeks later, Hillary found herself awake at 2:30 a.m., but this time she didn't go straight to the kitchen. Instead, she sat in bed and breathed deeply, remembering Dr. Martinez's words. Bring your mind back to today, to this moment, to this breath. She was safe. She was warm. She had a roof over her head and food in the refrigerator. In this moment, in this breath, she was fine. But the anxiety was still there, a familiar presence whispering about future scenarios. Hillary picked up the phone and for the first time called Sarah. "Mom, is everything okay?" Sarah's voice was alert despite the hour. "Everything's fine," Hillary said quickly. You said to call if I was awake and worried." "Of course. Emma just fell asleep after a feeding. Want to talk?" "I don't want to bother you." "Mom, you're not bothering me. Actually, it's nice to have company during these night feedings." Hillary settled more comfortably in bed. "How do you do it, Sarah? How do you not constantly worry about Emma's future? About all the things that could go wrong?" Sarah laughed softly. "Who said I don't worry? I worry all the time. I worry if she's eating enough, if she's developing normally, if I'll be a good mother." "But you seem so calm. On the outside, maybe. Inside is a different story." Sarah paused. "But you know what helps me? Remembering that worry is love with nowhere to go, and that the best thing I can do for Emma is be present for her today." "Worry is love with nowhere to go," Hillary repeated. "I never thought of it that way." "You taught me that, actually, when I was a teenager and was always anxious about tests, about boys, about the future. You said it was normal to worry because it meant I cared, but that I shouldn't let worry steal my joy from the present." Hillary smiled in the darkness. "I said that? You did, and now I'm saying it back to you." They talked for another 20 minutes, about Emma, about the garden, about small everyday things. When Hillary finally hung up, she felt calmer than she had felt in weeks. Maybe the answer wasn't to stop worrying completely. Maybe it was learning not to face worries alone. In the next session, Hillary told Dr. Martinez about her nighttime conversation with Sarah and how she had felt less alone with her worries. "That's significant progress," the therapist said. "You're learning that vulnerability can be a strength, not a weakness." "It's still difficult," Hillary admitted. "My whole life, I was the strong person, the one who took care of others. And now you're learning that being cared for doesn't diminish your strength. In fact, it can increase it." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "Hillary, can I share something with you? A perspective that might help?" "Sure." There's an ancient philosophy that says life is like a river. When we're young, we try to swim against the current, fighting to control every aspect of our lives. But as we age and gain wisdom, we learn to navigate with the current, using our experience to guide us, but not fighting against the natural flow of life. Hillary considered this. "So you're saying I should stop fighting? Not stop fighting, but choose your battles wisely. Some things are under your control, like taking care of your health, maintaining relationships, finding joy in the present. Others are not, like how long you'll live, what economic crises might come, how the world will change. But how do I accept uncertainty? Gradually, one day at a time, one breath at a time." Dr. Martinez smiled. "And by remembering that you've already navigated many uncertainties in your life, you survived childhood poverty, raised children, lost a husband, faced a global pandemic, you're more resilient than you think." Hillary had never thought of herself as resilient, but when she looked back at all the changes and challenges she had faced, she realized the therapist was right. "Dr. Martinez," Hillary said slowly, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Sure. Have you ever been afraid of aging? Of not having control over your future?" The therapist smiled. "Every day. I'm 52, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I'm saving enough for retirement, if my health will hold up, if I'll be relevant when I'm older." And how do you deal with it? The same way I'm teaching you. I remind myself that fear of the future can steal joy from the present. I focus on what I can control today, and I surround myself with people who love me, so I don't have to face uncertainties alone. Hillary nodded, feeling a deep connection with the therapist. It was comforting to know that even professionals who helped others faced the same basic human fears. "Can I give you an assignment for this week?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Sure. I want you to practice active gratitude. Every morning, before checking your bank accounts or reading the news, I want you to write 3 things you're grateful for on that specific day. They can be small things: the taste of coffee, a call from a friend, sunlight coming through the window. How will this help with my financial anxiety?" Gratitude changes our perspective. When we focus on what we have, instead of what might be lacking, our brain literally rewires itself to see abundance instead of scarcity. Hillary left the session with a small notebook Dr. Martinez gave her. On the cover was written, "Moments of Gratitude." That night, before sleeping, she wrote her first 3 entries. 1. Emma smiled at me today in the garden. 2. Sarah called just to talk. 3. The roses are still blooming, even in October. It was a small beginning, but Hillary felt something changing inside her, a small light turning on in the darkness of her worries. 3 weeks had passed since Hillary began her gratitude journal. The practice had become part of her morning routine, along with coffee and checking the weather. She discovered that starting the day focusing on what she had instead of what she might lose changed the entire tone of her following hours. It was a November morning when Hillary sat in the kitchen with her journal, watching the first snow of the season falling gently in the garden. She wrote, 1. The first snow is always magical, no matter how many times you see it. 2. Michael called yesterday to tell about Mia's presentation in the school choir. 3. My health is good. I can walk, think clearly, take care of myself. While writing the third entry, Hillary stopped. When was the last time she had really appreciated her good health? She always focused on what could go wrong, diseases she might develop, care she might need, but rarely celebrated the fact that, at 74, she was still independent and capable. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, 82 years old. "Hillary, dear, could you help me? My grandson is trying to teach me to use this new computer, but I don't understand any of it." Hillary smiled. Mrs. Patterson had moved to the neighborhood 2 years ago, after her husband died. She was a sweet woman, but completely lost with technology. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson. I'll be there in 5 minutes." Hillary spent the morning at her neighbor's house, helping her set up email and teaching her to make video calls with family. Mrs. Patterson was an enthusiastic student, taking careful notes and asking intelligent questions. "You're an angel," Mrs. Patterson said when they finished. "I felt so isolated without being able to talk to my grandchildren. Now I can see them whenever I want." Walking back home, Hillary reflected on the morning. She had felt useful, needed, capable. She had used her skills to help someone, and it brought her a satisfaction she hadn't felt in months. That afternoon, in the session with Dr. Martinez, Hillary told about her morning with Mrs. Patterson. "How did you feel helping her?" the therapist asked. "Good, really good." Hillary smiled. "I had forgotten how nice it is to be useful." Interesting that you use the word useful. How do you define usefulness? Hillary thought for a moment. Being able to contribute, to make a difference in someone's life. And do you think you can only be useful if you're financially independent? The question caught Hillary by surprise. "I never thought of it that way." "Did Mrs. Patterson care about your financial situation when you were helping her?" "No, of course not. So your usefulness, your value as a person, isn't tied to your money. It's tied to who you are, what you know, your ability to connect with others." Hillary felt something moving inside her, an understanding that was just beginning to take shape. "Dr. Martinez," she said slowly, "I think I confused financial security with emotional security. How so? I thought if I had enough money, I would feel safe. But Mrs. Patterson has much less money than I do, and she seems at peace. She accepts help without shame, offers what she can, lives each day as it comes. And what does that tell you? That maybe wealth isn't just about money. Maybe it's about relationships, about purpose, about accepting that we're all interdependent. Dr. Martinez smiled. That's a profound insight, Hillary. How can you apply this in your life? Hillary considered the question. Maybe I can stop measuring my security only in numbers. Maybe I can start seeing my network of relationships, my health, my experience as forms of wealth too. And how would this change your perspective on the future? Well, Hillary said, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. If I'm rich in relationships, then I'll never really be alone. If I'm rich in experience, then I'll always have something to offer. And if I'm rich in love, then maybe the future isn't so scary after all. December arrived with a snowstorm that covered Cedar Falls with a silent white blanket. Hillary was in the kitchen, preparing gingerbread cookies, a tradition she and Robert had maintained for decades. But this time, she wasn't alone. Sarah was sitting at the table, nursing Emma, while Michael and his family had arrived from Seattle for a year-end visit. Jake, 16, was trying to teach his grandmother to use a music app on the tablet, while Mia, 14, decorated cookies with impressive artistic concentration. "Grandma," Jake said, "did you know you can listen to any song that was ever recorded on this little device?" Hillary laughed. "When I was your age, we had to wait for our favorite song to play on the radio to hear it." "That's so old," Mia exclaimed, but fondly. "Tell us more about how it was before." While Hillary shared stories of her youth, she noticed something. She hadn't thought about her bank accounts or calculated financial scenarios in hours. Her mind was completely present, absorbed in the joy of being with her family. Later that night, after everyone went to sleep, Hillary and Michael sat in the living room, sharing a cup of hot chocolate. "Mom," Michael said, "you seem different, more light." "I feel different," Hillary admitted. "Therapy has helped me see things from a new perspective. Sarah told me you were worrying a lot about money." Hillary nodded. "I was. Actually, I was terrified at the idea of not having enough, of becoming a burden to you all. And now? Now I understand that my fears weren't really about money. They were about control, about purpose, about my place in the world." Hillary looked at her son. "And I realized that my place in the world isn't determined by my bank balance." Michael smiled. "What is your place then?" "Here, with you all, being grandma, being mom, being Mrs. Patterson's friend, being someone who still has a lot to give and a lot to receive. You always knew that, Mom. We always knew." "Sometimes we need to remember truths we already know," Hillary said, "especially when fear tries to convince us otherwise." Michael leaned over and kissed his mother's forehead. "I'm proud of you for seeking help, and I'm happy you're finding peace." That night, Hillary wrote in her gratitude journal, 1. My house full of family and laughter. 2. The wisdom that comes with age and experience. 3. The courage to change, even at 74. January brought a cutting cold to Iowa, but also brought clarity to Hillary. She was in her 10th session with Dr. Martinez, reflecting on the changes of the past months. "How would you describe where you are now compared to when we started?" the therapist asked. Hillary considered the question carefully. "I still worry about the future. I think I'll always worry a little. It's part of who I am. But now I understand the difference between productive worry and paralyzing anxiety." "Can you explain that difference?" "Productive worry is when I review my financial plans once a month, make sure I have an updated will, or talk to my children about my wishes for the future." Paralyzing anxiety is when I stay awake at 3 a.m, calculating catastrophic scenarios that probably will never happen. Dr. Martinez nodded. "And how do you deal with anxiety when it appears?" "First, I breathe. Then I ask myself, am I safe now, in this moment? The answer is always yes. Then I remind myself that I don't need to solve all future problems today. Hillary smiled. And if I'm still anxious, I call Sarah or do something useful, like helping Mrs. Patterson or working in the garden. You've developed a very solid toolkit. I learned that aging doesn't mean becoming useless or irrelevant. It means changing roles, from provider to wise woman, from caregiver to someone who can also be cared for, from someone who controls everything to someone who accepts what she can't control. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. Hillary, would you like to share your journey with others? I have a support group for people dealing with anxiety related to aging. Your insights could help a lot. The idea of helping others who were going through what she had gone through filled Hillary with purpose. I would love that. 2 weeks later, Hillary found herself sitting in a circle with 6 other people in Dr. Martinez's group room. There was Margaret, 68, recently retired and terrified by the lack of structure in her days. Robert, not her Robert, but another Robert, 71, who had lost his wife the previous year and didn't know how to live alone. Linda, 79, who constantly worried about her deteriorating health. Hillary, Dr. Martinez said, would you like to share how your perspective on financial anxiety changed? Hillary looked around the circle, seeing reflections of her own past fears in the faces before her. When I started therapy, she began, I was convinced my problem was money. I calculated and recalculated, trying to find absolute security in numbers. Margaret nodded vigorously. I do that every day, but I discovered it wasn't really about money, Hillary continued. It was about control. It was about fear of being a burden. It was about not knowing what my purpose was now that I wasn't working or actively raising children. How did you change that? Robert asked. Gradually. First, I learned the difference between useful worry and destructive anxiety. Then, I started redefining wealth, not just as money, but as relationships, health, experience, purpose. Linda leaned forward. But what if you really run out of money? What if you need expensive care? Those are valid concerns, Hillary said, and it's smart to plan for them. But I learned I can prepare for the future without living in constant terror of it. And more importantly, I learned that even if the worst scenario happens, I won't be alone. How do you know that? Margaret asked. Hillary smiled. Because I stopped trying to be independent and learned to be interdependent. I accept help when I need it, offer help when I can, and trust that the people who love me will be there for me just as I am for them. The group continued for another hour, with each person sharing their fears and hopes. Hillary discovered that listening to others articulate their anxieties helped her see how universal these fears were and how treatable. After the session, Margaret approached Hillary. Thank you for sharing your story. You gave me hope that I can find peace too. You can, Hillary said with conviction. It won't be overnight and it won't be perfect, but you can find a way to live with uncertainty without being dominated by it. March arrived with the first signs of spring. Hillary was in the garden, preparing the beds for planting, when Sarah joined her with Emma, now 10 months old and beginning to crawl. How is the support group going? Sarah asked, sitting on the grass while Emma explored the dry leaves. Well, it's gratifying to help others who are going through what I went through. Hillary sat back on her heels. Actually, it made me realize how much I've grown in the past months. How so? Well, 6 months ago I was terrified about my financial future. Now I still worry sometimes, but it doesn't paralyze me anymore. I have a plan, I have a support network, and I have purpose. Sarah smiled. And what is your purpose now? Hillary looked at Emma, who was trying to eat a leaf, being grandma, helping Mrs. Patterson with technology, participating in the support group, taking care of this garden. She paused, living each day fully instead of worrying about all the days that might come. That sounds like wisdom to me. Maybe it is, or maybe it's just acceptance. Hillary smiled. I used to think that accepting uncertainty meant giving up. Now I understand it means trusting in myself, in my family, in the fact that I can handle whatever comes. Emma crawled over to Hillary and pulled herself up to stand, holding onto her grandmother's leg. Hillary picked her up, and Emma laughed, a pure sound of joy. "You know," Hillary said, "I was so focused on ensuring I had enough resources to live that I almost forgot to actually live. And now? Now I understand that life isn't about having guarantees. It's about finding joy and meaning even in uncertainty." Hillary kissed the top of Emma's head. "And about trusting that the love we give returns to us in ways we can't always predict." It was an April afternoon when Hillary sat in her last individual session with Dr. Martinez. They had decided Hillary was ready to continue only with the monthly support group. "How do you feel about ending our individual sessions?" the therapist asked. "Ready," Hillary said confidently. "Not because all my fears have disappeared, but because now I have the tools to deal with them." "Which tools do you consider most valuable?" Hillary thought for a moment. "Mindful breathing, definitely. When I feel anxiety rising, I stop and breathe, and it brings me back to the present." She counted on her fingers. "The gratitude journal completely changed my morning perspective. The support network, knowing I can call Sarah or Michael when I need to. And perhaps most importantly, understanding that my value isn't tied to my financial independence." "And how do you see your future now?" "Still uncertain," Hillary said honestly. "I don't know how long I'll live, what health challenges I might face, or how the economy might change. But now I see uncertainty as part of the human condition, not as a personal failure." Dr. Martinez smiled. "That's a profound shift in perspective." "It is. And you know what's funny? I worry less about money now than when I had more energy to earn more. Because now I understand that real security doesn't come from numbers in a bank account. It comes from knowing who you are, having meaningful relationships, and trusting your ability to adapt." "Hillary, do you have any advice for someone who is starting where you started?" Hillary considered carefully. "First, seek help. Don't try to face fears alone. They grow in isolation. Second, question your fears. Ask yourself, is this fear based on reality or imaginary catastrophes? Third, redefine wealth. You're richer than you think, just maybe not in the way you expected." She paused. "And finally, remember that aging is a privilege denied to many. Instead of fearing the future, celebrate the fact that you've made it this far." 6 months later, Hillary was sitting on the porch, watching Emma take her first steps in the garden. Spring had given way to summer, and the garden was lush with flowers she and Robert had planted years ago, but also with new additions Hillary had made alone. Michael was visiting again, this time just with Jake, who was interested in learning about gardening for a school project. "Grandma," Jake said, "can you teach me about composting?" Hillary smiled. "Sure. Composting is about transforming scraps into something nutritious. It's a good metaphor for life." While they worked together in the garden, Hillary reflected on her journey. She still checked her accounts regularly, still planned for the future, still worried occasionally. But these actions now came from a place of responsibility, not terror. She had learned that retirement didn't mean the end of her usefulness, but a transformation of her role. She was no longer the nurse who cared for patients, but the grandmother who offered wisdom, the neighbor who helped with technology, the group member who shared hope. "Grandma," Jake said, interrupting her thoughts, "my mom said you were really worried about money before. Do you still worry?" Hillary considered how to respond honestly, but age-appropriately. "Sometimes," she said, "it's normal to worry about the future, but I learned that worrying too much can steal joy from the present." "How did you stop worrying so much?" "I didn't stop completely, but I learned the difference between useful worry and harmful worry. And I learned I don't have to face my fears alone." Jake nodded seriously. "That makes sense." That night, Hillary wrote in her gratitude journal, a practice she had maintained for almost a year. 1. Jake wants to learn gardening. The next generation will continue the traditions. 2. Emma took her first steps today. Witnessing milestones is a privilege. 3. I feel at peace with my future, whatever it may be. 1 year after her first therapy session, Hillary was preparing Thanksgiving dinner. Her house was full. Sarah and her family, Michael and his family, Mrs. Patterson, who had become like a sister, and 2 members of her support group who didn't have family nearby. While observing the table full of people she loved, Hillary thought about how her definition of wealth had changed. She had less money than the previous year, cost of living, some minor medical expenses, gifts for grandchildren, but she felt infinitely richer. "What are you grateful for this year, Grandma?" Mia asked during the traditional gratitude round. Hillary looked around the table, smiling faces, animated conversations, tangible love filling every corner of the room. "I'm grateful for learning that security doesn't come from having all the answers, but from trusting that I can handle the questions," she said. "I'm grateful for discovering that aging doesn't mean becoming irrelevant, but becoming wise. And I'm grateful for all of you who taught me that we're never really alone." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Hillary sat in her favorite chair, Robert's chair, and reflected on her journey. She still didn't know how long she would live, how much money she would need, or what challenges she would face. But she knew she had resources beyond money: love, wisdom, purpose, and a network of people who cared about her. Anxiety still visited occasionally, like an old acquaintance who appeared without warning. But now Hillary knew how to receive it, not with terror, but with understanding. "Hello, anxiety," she would say. "I know why you're here. You're trying to protect me. But I'm fine now, in this moment." And most of the time, that was enough. Hillary picked up her gratitude journal and wrote her final entry of the day. 1. A house full of love and laughter. 2. The wisdom that comes from facing fears and finding peace on the other side. 3. Understanding that retirement isn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter. She closed the journal and smiled. Tomorrow would bring its own uncertainties, but also its own possibilities. And Hillary was ready for both. Hillary's journey reminds us that fears about aging and financial security are deeply human and universal. Her story isn't about finding perfect answers, but about learning to live with grace amid uncertainty. Perhaps you identify with some of Hillary's concerns. Perhaps you too have wondered if you'll have enough resources for the future, or if you'll maintain your independence and dignity as you age. These are valid and important concerns. But Hillary's story suggests that our real security may come not just from our financial resources, but from our ability to adapt, maintain meaningful relationships, and find purpose at every stage of life. Now, I'd like to hear from you. What worries you most about the future? Is it financial security, like Hillary, or something different? Did you also think retirement would mean complete rest, only to discover new types of challenges? What kinds of wealth beyond money do you value in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, simply naming our fears out loud, as Hillary learned, can be the first step toward finding peace with them. Remember, you're not alone in your concerns, and seeking support, as Hillary did, is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. What reflections did Hillary's story awaken in you? I'd love to hear your perspective.